So, welcome back to Silmarillion Total War and to another battle replay that I lifted from the Discord. I believe this one was kind of in the same group as the ones, I think it was Waffles, yes, who he posted up a few in two separate parts, so I'm going to take the other part of it as well. This is the Hills of HITHLUM, and this certainly looks like my kind of map because there's a lot going on. In spite of the fact that it is another pitch battle, there should be plenty of interest here. There's loads of terrain features, lots of potential cover from the trees, lots of little choke points. I think this is a map we have seen once before, or at least an earlier version of it, I think, based on the two towers set up here in the middle, but we've never really seen the whole map before because that was, I think, a three-way 1v1v1 free-for-all. Whereas this is going to be a 4v4 pitch battle, so we're going to see pretty much the entirety of the map put to good use. So let's go through the armies, which I think is really just an all-over-the-place collection. And Waffles himself is going to be playing as the Easterlings, had some good success in the last battle we saw him play as them as. Despoilers of Doriath are going to be pretty damn good at carving their way through lighter troops, good charge bonus on them as well, anti-cavalry bonus when cavalry gets bogged down with them in melee, but pretty fragile. On a more open map like this, they can be isolated and destroyed. Then they've got their big brothers right next to them, the Sons of Ulfang, who add armour piercing into the mix, which does substantially change the kind of unit that they're going to be good at fighting, because the Sons of Ulfang, where the Despoilers are going to struggle against heavy infantry, the Sons of Ulfang are going to relish fighting up against them because of that armour piercing. Now, they are a bodyguard tier unit, but they do only have that single hit point, so among the bodyguard units they are relatively fragile, but that's not too surprising given what the Easterling Falksman focuses tend to be, which is going to be inflicting pain rather than keeping themselves alive. The Amberona Honour Guard are the other side of that coin, however, being the tankiest unit that the Easterlings have to offer. Very big shields, good armour values, multiple HP, all of that good stuff, but they're going to be substantially slower at dealing damage to most targets than the Sons of Ulfang that we have already seen. The rest of the Easterling army is moving to link up immediately with their allies, so we can see you've got some halberdiers of Lothlin over here, plenty of them. Obviously we saw them use a fantastic effect the last time we saw the Easterlings on the field. We'll see if that proves to be the case again. Warband of Lothlin backing them up, which the most basic unit the Easterlings have to offer, but even still a good shield value on them, which does give them a lot of good utility. They are spears as well, so enemy cavalry will want to steer clear. Wardens of Lothlin back here, much better spears of course. They actually, I don't know if their shield value is lower, but they're much better at being in melee, much better armour values, all of that good stuff. Some Fangs of the Faithless, which the only Easterling foot archer, so yeah, kind of necessary to bring them if you want to dig in and be a bit more defensive. And some Salamandrine Guard as well, which another unit we've seen used to fantastic effect recently. Fire arrows as well, lowering the morale of enemy combatants. They are going to be moving to meet up immediately with Batu, who is playing as the Guarded Realm of Doriath. Doriath, of course, another faction which has got access to some really savage attacking units, more of an armour-piercing focus here, though, you'd have to say. Marksmen of Region and Shield Bearers offering the initial front line, however, Silverthorn arrows to knock people over on the approach, and then obviously the spears to hold the line. There is, however, the Rangers of the Girdle in here as well, offering some poison projectiles alongside the Fangs of the Faithless, which have the same. Sword Host of Region and Shield Bearers of Region once again, so some detachments. So maybe less of the Axemen than we would expect from Doriath. Then behind we do have the standard Axe Guard as well. Again, a little bit more damage orientated as Doriath are as a faction. And they are there. And finally back here we have the Warriors of Region, which is where of course Doriath get much of their armour piercing from. Very nasty unit to have to face off against. And then we of course have the, again, the best unit that Doriath have on foot in pure melee terms, the Donath and Mablung, which have got the armour piercing on those great maces as well. So big armour piercing presence in behind the initial more defensive force, but certainly more of an upper end, more upfront and personal Doriath army this. Then we have Fingolfin, who's played by Catragon. We've got some Armatar of Barad-Ithel, 2 units of them to help lock things down on the front, the Herdsmen of HITHLUM offering the initial volleys from their bows, but then pulling out those two-handed axes in melee, with some Fierdsmen of Dorloman in here as well. We've got the Catapult, manned by some Bladesmen of Barad-Ithel. If they can get up onto this hill, it will be a really good defensive position to hold, potentially lots of choke points here in this middle part of the map, which Fingolfin will be hoping to make use of with their artillery, but also, of course, Fingolfin being one of the factions with access to a unit of pikes here in the Sentries of HITHLUM, very important for them to be used effectively. More herdsmen of HITHLUM back here. We've also got the Lancers of Anon in Galith, which are a lighter unit of Lancers. They do at least have a shield, but really charging in and out, being swift across the battlefield is going to be very important for them if they want to pay for themselves. Arqueni Findicano, very different with their armour-piercing arrows that they can loose. Interesting to see how they get utilised. More Lancers, and then over here we've got the higher tier units with some marksmen on the front, more Fyrdsmen and sentries. Then we've got the Sons of Hurin and Arantar, both fighting side by side. And finally on the blue team we have the Grey Elves of Mithrim, played by Y2K86. Some Sword Bearers of Mithrim, some Tunnel Runners back here as well, so Mithrim well known for having a pretty good and numerous mid-tier force with plenty of archers to back that up. The Scions of Tuor are a very strong armour-piercing infantry unit, but their lack of armour can be a bit of a problem against certain forces. We'll see if that proves to be the case here. 2 units of Elders of the Twilight Hearth. Most of Mithrim's archer force is about dealing damage, but the Elders also twin this by being the tankiest unit of archers that they have to offer, and also being good spears in melee. The Bannerats of the Hithershore, another unit of dangerous lancers, much like the Lancers of Anon in Galith, but the Bannerats are going to be a little bit stronger all round, especially when it comes to keeping themselves alive. Hunters of Mithrim, throwing projectiles are something else that the Grey Elves do have at their disposal. The Eagle-Eyed of Androth, lots of range on them, and some Sword Bearers also. There could be a few hidden units in and around here as well, given that they are in a pretty heavily wooded part of the map, but we shall see. Now then, moving on to the red team, starting off with the Elves of the Falas, played by Alexios22, leading the way with the more heavily armoured Noldor units, which is perhaps for the best, considering Mithrim are across the way and our arrow fire is going to be forthcoming. The Iran Kialim will be guarding the nobles of Balar. If they can get set into a defensive position and force Mithrim into an engagement, that's something where the Falathrim should feel fairly confident with units such as that. The Warriors of Eglarest as well, more medium tier units. They'll be worried about stuff like the Hewing Guildsmen. We didn't see any, but they could have been hidden, but Eglarest units are still going to be able to put up a decent fight there. Brythombar units, more of an auxiliary force with the javelins that they can offer. The Orion Ephedune are a very tanky unit of spears indeed, but they are almost entirely a defensive unit really. If you need to deal damage quickly, they are not the answer, but if you need to withstand some pressure, then they most certainly are. Marines of Brythombar are over here, some more Aran Kialim, and Nobles of Balar in a force there. Marksmen of Balar guarding the flank, maybe worried about an attack coming from this direction, but they needn't have worried about that because no such Mithrim units are over there, none that we can see anyway, maybe they are hidden. Moving on to Finarfin, played by Stewie, another very good defensive force. The Wardens of Nargothrond and Marksmen of Nargothrond, a classic combination here. Armour-piercing spears and then the split-shot projectiles will be very good at dealing damage to the lighter armoured Edain from Fingolfin, and much of what Mithrim have to offer as well. Mithrim can do damage with their archers, but they're not exactly designed for a skirmish fight against a force like this. Wardens of Nargothrond as well. Then we have the Talath Dianin units, some javelin support combined with being good medium infantry. We have the Sartor Finderato, the very defensive spears as well, much like the Orion Ephedune. They are a very strong defensive spear unit. I think the Orion might be slightly tankier all around because owing to a slightly higher shield value, but very, very similar in terms of the focus of those two units. Defenders of Talath Dianin are a spear unit in addition to having those javelins at their disposal. And then we also have some more swordsmen, more wardens, and some more marks. Interesting to see the lack of bridge wards, but perhaps on a map like this he was expecting things to be a little bit more fluid, so the pikes could prove to have been more of a hindrance in such a situation. But considering the choke points in the middle, and considering Fingolfin have their own pikes, maybe that could prove to be a bit of a mistake in the long run. Then we have Panthan of Barsoom playing as the Naugrim. Obviously crossbow is going to potentially be very, very important, although yeah, I mean, crossbows are dealing with some of the higher priority targets from Doriath and the Easterlings, yes, most certainly. The Vault Wardens of Tumunzahar, yeah. They're going to be very useful as well, obviously going to be able to outrange anything Doriath or the Easterlings have. Polearms wise, Brotherhood of the Silvered Hammer also marching in step with them. Halberdiers as well, the Dwarves of course the only faction in the game to have access to both a pike unit and a halberd unit, so in terms of phalanx warfare they would have to be the best faction in the game as it stands, but at least the Eastlings can contest that here. And then we've got some more Iron Arbalists, some more Brotherhood of the Silvered Hammer, as well as more Vault Wardens. And then just in behind we've got the support of the Axe Throwers as well, which should be pretty damn good against the Easterling forces, more Iron Halberdiers, and then some Iron Legion Engineers. I think as you get further away, they very serious pop in there, but no matter. And finally, Ossiriand, played by Tundra's Fox. The real difference in focus is here between Ered Luin and Ossiriand, but if Ossiriand can act as a supporting tool to Ered Luin, they could cover for one another's weaknesses brilliantly, or if they're too disparate, they could prove to be one another's downfall. The Ents are here, a monstrous unit, counter to much of what Ossiriand have to offer, but the Ents could be really, really useful if they get in and amongst the right kind of units, but they need to be careful of Doriath's damage dealing capabilities and actually the Easterlings' Falxman. Earthen End Tower have got that armour piercing themselves, but of course Ossiriand, in much the same way as Mithrim over on the other side, very much a missile-focused faction. Missiles in terms of dealing damage more so than a skirmish fight. Lots of Earthen End Tower, however, so more of a heavier focus when it comes to Ossiriand's skirmish force on this occasion. Mythern and Tol Galen have got that armour piercing. It's going to be useful in parts against the Easterlings and Doriath, especially against those Lothlin units that the Easterlings have to offer, but maybe not as much as it would be against certain other forces in the game. Spear Host of Galleon offering their support as well, and then one of the tankier units Ossiriand have for line holding capabilities, the Kinsman of Denethor, and that's going to be it that we can see of from Ossiriand. There's going to be a far more substantial force lurking in the woodlands as well, but yeah, I don't know how quick this battle is going to be to get underway, but just shy of 20k frames is not the longest battle for a 4v4, so I imagine things are going to get pretty violent pretty quickly. So without further ado, let's get this show on the road, shall we? I'm thinking surely the battle will begin firstly over here because of the closer proximity of the two sides, and also the fact that Catragon here does have access to that catapult. He's going to be able to force the hand of his opponent a little bit more perhaps, unless Stewie wants to try and dice with death a little bit. His army is scattered enough to the point where a catapult won't necessarily be the scariest thing in the world to him, but still you are putting your fate in the hands of random chance a little bit there, because you don't want to be losing too much in the way, especially of Nargothrond units, if Fingolfin are indeed who you need to be going up against later on. Those kind of units will be very, very necessary for dealing with some of Fingolfin's better stuff. Maybe less so the HITHLUM units. Indeed, the HITHLUM armor piercing will probably come in very handy against the better units that Finarfin have to offer. Well, I mean, it is interesting actually that the start of this battle is not immediately violent, because this isn't the longest battle in the world, so I can only imagine that things, when they do get underway, they're going to develop pretty quickly, and we will be having to make use of the trusty half-speed functionality. Herdsmen of HITHLUM, I mean, they have got the better position here for them over Stewie in the middle here, Fingolfin, so I probably would be strongly considering, if I were him, not advancing towards Fingolfin. Catragon also has got the assistance of his ally just to the side. The Herdsmen of HITHLUM going to be shooting into the Nargothrond units, the Fyrdsmen of Dorlomin moving forward as well. Here come the split shots though, and I mean, in a straight up skirmish fight, the Herdsmen of HITHLUM are not going to be the best archer in the game by any means. The angle is such though that actually the split shots are mostly missing, so that's actually, I mean, that's certainly not intentional, but it is a bit of good fortune there. But even so, I don't know whether this is going to be a good fight still for Fingolfin or not. I mean, if the Wardens of Nargothrond do choose to engage in melee, they're by far the superior spearmen over the Edain that are before them. And over here we can see the sentries of Galleon and the Iron Legion Engineers moving forward from the red team, so I'm going to try and skirmish a little bit with the force of Waffles in the front here. And the Fangs of the Faithless are going to return fire. I mean, as with most things Ossiriand, ranged units are not going to be particularly tough, even with the higher density of Earthen End Tower. It's still primarily a damaged focused force. know if my mouse is actually on the way out as well, which would be a bit of a problem. Still, we can see that people are more comfortable opening with a bit of skirmishing here. Marksman of Balar moving forward, but the Eagle-Eyed of Androth got slightly raised elevation and superior range, but I mean, as soon as the Marksman of Balar do get into range of the Eagle-Eyed, this is the kind of skirmish fight which is certainly going to go in favour of the Falathrim. A couple of units of Eagle-Eyed, but I don't know necessarily whether they'll want to use their ammunition on that. Elves of the Twilight Hearth, it might be a bit of a different story. And over there we can see the first melee engagement getting underway. I believe as well that was actually, and indeed it is Fingolfin, the ones who initiated that engagement, which is a little bit surprising because the Fierdsmen are going to lose very, very handily to the Finarfin infantry. You can see Herdsmen of HITHLUM moving down, but I can see already a little bit of a problem with the way Fingolfin are setting out here. They're sending the Edain forwards on their own. The Edain really are better off when used as a supporting tool with the slightly more survivable Elven units. I mean, yes, with the charge here, these axes will do a pretty decent amount of damage initially to the Nargothrond units that are on the front line, but none of these Edain are going to have the survivability necessary, really, to fight this fight for any real length of time. With the support of the Swordsmen of Talath Din's javelins coming in as well, they will be pretty efficient at dealing with the herdsmen as well before they can then be engaged in melee themselves. Meanwhile, across the way, on the other half of the battlefield, really, split by the tower features in the middle, Iron Arbalists are moving in as the catapult volleys start to approach, and that was very fortuitous in terms of hits, but they were asking for trouble here, the dwarves, by setting up in the way they did, and the Brotherhood of the Silvered Hammer, and perhaps more worryingly for them, the Vault Wardens taking a decent amount of that damage. And the more that the Easterlings can inflict in those terms, the better it will be for them. Ossiriand's forces still lurking around in the shadows back there, starting to move forward a little bit more now because the dwarves will need their support at some point soon. Sentries of HITHLUM still moving forward, still this overextended portion of the Fingolfin line. The Herdsmen of HITHLUM, though, doing relatively well so far, but the more volleys like that they take, the worse it's going to get for them. Some individual herdsmen managing to connect so far. I mean, again, off the charge, they'll probably do pretty well against the Swordsmen of Talath Din, but as they settle into a regular rhythm, especially with the damage they've already taken, the Swordsmen are competent enough that they should be able to land good damage through the relatively low defensive values that the herdsmen are working with, and indeed there's a routing unit of them over here. The House of Fingolfin moving forward. I don't know why the frame rate is juddering so much. Maybe that's another symptom of the PC being no spring chicken anymore. Eagle-Eyed of Androth trying to shoot at the flanking force here. Stalks of Tauren Faroth from Finarfin. There's also the Scouts of Eglarest giving them some cover, some melee cavalry there. So Finarfin sending over some lighter troops to maybe get in and around the position that Mithrim have taken up, which is very defensive ultimately, up on this hill. Though Mithrim may be forced to abandon that position at some point. If Fingolfin continue to push forward, then Mithrim, whether they like it or not, are going to have to move forward. Otherwise they're going to be watching their allies simply crumble. Marksman of Barad Aithel also moving forward. So Catragon being kind of aggressive here. I don't know if that's what his allies actually want to do, but yeah, the Iran Kirlim easily going to be able to defeat the Marksman of Barad Aithel. Elves of the Twilight Hearth are now moving forwards. They can leave a defensive force on that hill and commit the rest of their units over, I think, to support their allies without too many problems, Mithrim. And that would put the ball firmly into the Falathrim's court on how to react to that. They've already got support down here, Alexios 22. Sentries moving in, pikes, so they're going to be able to solidify the melee position of a lot of these units, but they need to be hopeful that the Marksmen of Nargothrond don't get a good bead on them. The initial HITHLUM units fighting on home turf, but many of them falling by the wayside now, and the Sentries of HITHLUM moving in, but without any sort of support in front of them to help them withstand this punishment that they're taking, and a combination of javelins and throwing projectiles. Not going to be so great for them. The Armitar did manage to get into melee, but I'd imagine, I mean, it's a detachment of Warns of Nargothrond, so perhaps with superior numbers, the Armitar will be victorious, but yeah, those pikes are getting devastated, and I can appreciate the desire to be aggressive here from Catragon, but the execution has left a little bit to be desired. Warband of Lochlin getting in behind enemy lines now, though, so you can see the Dwarven position a little bit under threat now. Sword Host of Region, so Doriath not going to allow the Easterlings to advance on their lonesome. Shield Bearers of Region moving in, the Outriders of the Girdle revealing themselves and charging into some exposed units, but they need to get out of there pretty quickly, otherwise the Ents will trample them underfoot. I really don't know what's up with the frame rate in this one. Outriders of the Wheel are in here as well, so hoping to get in amongst and charge in some Doriath infantry, but with the spears in close proximity, that's not the best for them. I believe spears do have a bonus against monster or elephant class units as they are in the Medieval 2 files, but they're still ultimately going to take tons of damage at the hands of the Ents' area of effect attacks. The Mithrim and Tolgalen are moving forward, so the rest of the Ossiriand units are now revealing themselves and coming in from the flank. Maybe they were hoping to get a little bit further around, and some of the sentries are managing to do so, but Doriath have already set up a bit of a defensive position as a countermeasure to this, and the race against time is on for Ossiriand really, because if their flanking force cannot attack the flank quickly enough, then I do think that between the Easterlings and the main body of the Doriath army, they should be able to overrun this front line. The saving grace there might be the fact that the Dwarves are so good at withstanding punishment like this that they could hold the line long enough for Ossiriand's force to have the desired effect. Shield Bearers taking some hits from crossbows as well, so their big shields won't be as effective as they would otherwise be. But it's the flanks over here as well which are in a bit of trouble. The Wardens of Lothlin managing to get in behind enemy lines, and if they can stop the axe throwers and crossbows from doing their thing. But so far, the Dwarves have actually done pretty well on that front line. Meanwhile, I'd be worried for Fingolfin's fate. This is really the main area of concern for the blue team. More herdsmen of HITHLUM are now in position, firing their missiles in, but Finarfin's defensive prowess will be paying dividends once again, and once again the frames taking a dump. It's really frustrating, that. Sentries are on the verge of defeat on the front line as well, so they're going to need support here pretty quickly. Falathrim down here, Marksman of Bannerats. What do they have left actually, Fingolfin? The catapult needs to start firing away. It's still available, they surely haven't used up much of their ammunition. The Lancers of Anon and Galith managing to get a decent charge there, downhill into an exposed unit of swordsmen, but immediately being introduced to some split shot arrows. Over here, Urankirlim alongside Warns of Nargothrond and Marksman of Balar. That is a very solid front line indeed, comprised of the tankiest units that Finarfin and the Falathrim have to offer them. The medium units of Mithrim, like I said, they're very functional, but against this kind of opposition they're really not the best, and the Orion Ephedune are going to be able to easily outlast the kind of damage that the Tunnel Runners are going to be able to deal. The Bane of the Incomers are there. Now that's a rather erratic kind of unit that can be utilised. There's going to be a lot of damage they can chuck out, but it's also not the sort of damage that can be easily directed. The Urankirlim having to fight uphill and relatively alone against some of these Mithrim infantry units now, with some of the Stalkers on the flank also getting in here, engaging the Hunters of Mithrim in melee. So far, I'd have to say the red team are looking like the dominant force in the battle so far. The Bane of the Incomers still doing their best. The Bannerats, I mean, stuff like this cavalry needs to be doing a bit less dithering on the part of the blue team and start charging in. I mean, we saw the Lancers from Fingolfin doing that down here, but they are a relatively fragile unit as far as cavalry goes, so I'm not sure how much life they will have left in them. Fingolfin Catapult could be just the sort of thing to start mounting a bit of a comeback. Marines of Brithum by utilising their javelins still. The Herdsmen of HITHLUM trying to counter-attack as well. Swordsmen of Tarthin and pushing up the hill. Herdsmen of HITHLUM are getting in the way, but not for much longer, so that catapult may not have much time left before it is exposed. Very unfortunate though that those hits didn't land. We saw earlier on the Easterling catapult had far more luck. Sons of Ulfang, lots of high damage units coming around here now. The Falksmen of the Easterlings and the Axemen of Doriath crunching in from the sides, and they're fighting well on the front line still, the dwarves, but they are being overrun slowly but surely. The presence of the Easterling halberds on the front line has definitely given this fight a more even look, and with the flanks now very much an exposed entity, this is a worry. The chariots are coming in, but this is where the Wardens of Lothland will come in handy. They get bogged down here and in amongst the spears, and the chariots will end up dying off pretty fast. The Falksmen actually have an anti-cavalry bonus as well, and yeah, unsurprisingly they are starting to die off. So the dwarves very much exposed, so things looking up now for the blue team over on this side. The Easterlings really, with Doriath's extra armour piercing, having the desired effect on the dwarven front line. The Outriders of the Girdle, the Salamandrine Guard hoping to twist the knife a little bit with their flaming shot. And Ossiriand as well. I mean, they won't be as exposed to the kind of armour piercing that Doriath have in the Donath and Mablung, but against stuff like the one-handed Axeman, they'll be very efficient against Ossiriand. The most heavily armoured of Ossiriand's units as well, and the Kinsmen of Denethor are in here, so actually the armour piercing won't be going to waste really. And I think the flank was kind of abandoned in the end. I think Ossiriand actually ended up retreating some of their units and falling back into a more conservative shape. Perhaps they realised they weren't going to make it in time, so they just need to make life as difficult as possible for the blue team over here. Things looking pretty bleak. I mean, the dwarves, they still have a lot of their pole arms, but it's been the attacks coming in from the sides that have been the main problem so far. Outriders of the Girdle, they've had their look changed again since the last time we saw them, I think. I like it. Wardens of Lothland, and now, of course, when your position is completely exposed like this, suddenly your polearm units become more of a liability.
Our brave warriors have killed our foe's general. Now his men will fear us.
Is that the Falathrim's general? Yes, it must have been. That must be Mithrim killing off the Falathrim general. Marksmen of Balar pushing forward, but the Elves of the Twilight Hearth very much getting in their way. So Mithrim so far holding on, but Nobles of Balar pushing up the hill. Marksmen of Balar pushing further into enemy territory with the Scouts of Eglera. So over here, things certainly coming up trumps for the red team. Nobles of Balar and the Orion Ephraim continuing to push forward. Rather unfortunate for the Falathrim to lose their general in this manner to a unit, well, a section of the Mithrim army that was already doomed, really. Scouts of Tauren Faroth going to rout them off pretty quickly with poison projectiles. Stalks of Tauren Faroth, I should say. Some more pikes from Fingolfin moving forward. The Irimo Arantar fighting on the front line, but much like their Mithrim allies, it looks like Fingolfin are very much fighting a losing battle over here. Sartor Findarato also getting into place. Yeah, Finarfin securing the two towers in the middle of the battlefield, the catapult crew, the bladesmen of Barad-Ithel. There goes Fingolfin's general. Not too surprising that. Yeah, the Wardens of Nargothrond will finish off the catapult crew with a bit of support. Marksmen of Nargothrond turning around to support the Marines of Brithombar and finishing off what remains of the Armatar. So yeah, Fingolfin pretty much gone. There may be some lancers that we're just missing at this point, but I don't think so. Marines of Eglarest and plenty of range support coming in, so that relatively fresh unit of pikes as of just a moment ago getting focused down. Between themselves and the Irimo Arantar, they would be a fairly effective fighting force from the front, but I think the red team have done a very good job here. I think Fingolfin, as much as I like people being aggressive in these games, I think there was no real need for Fingolfin to be aggressive. He had the superior terrain, he had the catapult. The long-range archer war may not have gone his way in the way that he would have liked, given his focus on herdsmen of HITHLUM rather than bringing the heavier elven archers, but I don't know, I feel like being a bit more defensive would have been the answer there. There was no need to rush things. That was the Ossiriand general. That will be Mithrim's general. So generals starting to fall left, right and centre. I mean, it's not the longest battle ever seen, so that's not too surprising either. The Scions of Tuor are in here. As far as bodyguard units go, certainly not the ones with the most longevity because of their lack of defensive values. Kind of a Berserker class unit in many ways, just with a big old shield as well. Plenty of armor piercing. If they were used as part of a combined front line against the Noldor units from the Elves of the Falas, they would actually be very good, I feel. So it's going to be fairly convincing victories for both sides. We're going to see the Falathrim and Finarfin go up against Doriath and the Easterlings when all is said and done. Things were looking a little bit better for the red team over here than it was for the blue team on the other side, so maybe that will be the situation. Panthan of Barsu and Tundra's Fox now trying to get away with some of their units, try and get as many kills as they can to make life easier for their allies later. The Salamandrine Guard going to be able to hunt down the scouts of Gallion. Scared geese. Geese don't get scared easily. Vicious creatures. There's still a lot of vents here though, so I mean that's really what I would say is I think I would, having a look at the percentage of allies killed, yeah. So they are 10% behind the blue team, and I think that is reflected in the fact that the Dwarves and Ossiriand did better over here than Fingolfin and Mithrim did on the other side, and indeed they still have a few units left. The fact that the Ents are still alive is also a bit concerning. One of them isn't even bloodied. I think they probably need to reconsider here, the Easterlings and Doriath, because they're being kited a little bit. It's going to be a fairly swift end to proceedings when they do meet one another, because they've got quite a long way to transit before they face one another in combat here. Already forming up. There's not much that remains, but there is still a fight going on here, although it might just be clean-up for the few remaining Mithrim units that were on this hill. I mean, this is what I'm a little bit confused about. I think Fingolfin moving forward, it was very clear, I think, that Mithrim didn't want to move forward into the Falathrim, and much of what they did was more of a token effort, because they had their defensive position here. If Fingolfin had stayed over there, they would then, it was really just the space in between the two of these little defensive positions they would have needed to worry about. But I doubt that the red team would have marched through there anyway. That must have been the Dwarven general. Marksmen of Region already forming up over here. Eastlings going to be on their way across. Looks like mostly Doriath that remain. Sons of Ulfang already a little bit battered and bruised, but then they are more of a flash in the pan kind of unit anyway. Shield bearers. Still quite a fair few halberdiers, which will be very useful. The Ents on the way back, continuing to be a bit of a pain. The Eastern Catapult's still active as well. Players admitting defeat. But surely not Tundra's Fox if he has his Ents still available to him. Indeed, he's still got some of his Gallion units, which maybe he will be able to execute on his plan to flank the enemy, just not when and where he was expecting to do so. This is a real problem for the Eastlings as well, because as they make their way across this open field, the Scouts of Gallion are going to be able to fill their boots in terms of kills. I believe the Scouts of Gallion actually have armor piercing and melee as well, albeit their melee stats are very, very low, but the fact that it's armor piercing means they won't be utterly useless if they can get a flanking surrounding charge into a unit like the Halberdiers of Lothland, for example. Getting up close and personal with them. Meanwhile, Scouts of Eglarest moving into position. Marines of Brithombar starting to move forward as well. Good to see that both sides are not going to try and dig in on a hill. They are going to meet one another in battle. Scouts of Gallion moving parallel to these units. What is being caught here? Bands of the Faithless, some of the stragglers here. Salamandrine Guard, 2 of them remain, trying to shoot and take pot shots at the Ents. Yeah, I would back the red team here. They've got the percentage advantage, and positionally the fact that they can surround their foe is pretty damn significant. There was of Balar are ready. Scouts of Eglarest can also perform the role of gaining map control. So yeah, I mean, I suppose it's more understandable for the blue team to want to try and dig in here, in the position that maybe Fingolfin should have been taking up all along. Oh yeah, and this is a real problem here for Waffles. In his haste to try and get into a defensive shape, he has left his catapult behind. Medieval artillery, of course, very slow, and that poor catapult crew getting stomped on by the Ents, so another very good catch there by Ossiriand. And I think they needed that catapult, honestly, in order to try and equalise the odds. I mean, they can still use the catapult crew as a unit of basic spears, but that isn't going to be the kind of force that I'm sure they were hoping it would be. I don't know how much ammunition both sides necessarily have left at this point. Doriath and Mablung are still a very dangerous unit indeed. But already having seen combat, nothing is fresh any longer. And Wardens of Lothland trying to kite the Ents around, but again, I don't know if this is the best thing really. The Ents are just kicking the Wardens as they try to leave the area. What have we here? So we are going to see the final battle get underway, I think. Halberdiers are here, but so too are the nobles of Balar. Where would the catapult have positioned itself anyway? Probably where the Fingolfin one was, actually. Shooting down into these positions. I think the Falathrim probably the healthiest of the red team armies left. I don't think they had to exert themselves as much against Mithrim as Finarfin did against the aggressive push from Fingolfin. Which does go to show that Fingolfin, despite the fact I wouldn't have been as aggressive in their position in this battle, like they did do some damage at least against the Finarfin position. It was just always fighting a losing battle. Scouts of Eglarest moving in, but actually getting stuck really on the Doriath, and that's not what you want. Wardens of Lothland. Wait. I didn't even realise this was necessarily something you could do. I don't think we've ever seen an artillery crew pick up and use the artillery from one of their allies before. I'd be curious to know if the ammunition is unchanged in the catapult crew. I guess it is, because it's actually the infantry themselves that are manning the catapult which have the ammo, but so they're picking up Fingolfin's catapult and they're going to try and use that one. I hadn't even considered the possibility of that being something you could do. Wild. So maybe there's hope after all. I mean, they're going to need to utilise it pretty damn quickly because the horde is descending upon them and they do not have the quality to withstand what is coming their way. The Orion Afadun, I mean, they will take quite a bit of damage at the hands of those armour-piercing warriors from Doriath, but the overall quality and numbers that are crashing down upon them at this point. Front line looking a bit shaken up. They're going to need to use that catapult very quickly if they are going to utilise it at all. The Doriath over here, really the only thing that's tying this front line together at this point. And yeah, here come the scouts of Gellion. So they don't have the ability really to surround their foes, but they can at least act as infantry reinforcements to the assault which is already underway. Fangs of the Faithless, as has been often said, they aren't actually as impressive in melee as you might think to look at them, but their defensive abilities are still not terrible, but Nargothrond units will certainly have the beating of them. There goes the Finarfin general. But in the ascendancy such as they are, I don't think a morale shock is going to be on the cards anytime soon. For Finarfin or for the Falathrim, who would also have lost their general actually, so every general is going to be lost by the time this battle is over. There's Thingol, who will surely be the next to fall. Sons of Ulfang pulling themselves off this front line. This fight actually over here is actually even, but a large part of that is probably due to the quality that the Doriath possess in melee. Which is probably why the Sons of Ulfang have left, because they realise that they are going to lose on this other flank. This catapult not able to get into a position to fire, and ultimately the crew themselves are going to be getting engaged in melee pretty soon by the overwhelming numbers that they perceive. Scouts of Gellion still have a bit of ammunition. The Ents also wreaking havoc on this flank. Not being able to kill them off was also another failing of the blue team on the other side, really, but also perhaps a sign that Tundra was once again seeing the writing on the wall and salvaging what he could for later, and ultimately it's just another thing which puts this fight rather beyond the blues at this point, and they're trying to use the Sons of Ulfang to bring the Ents down, but it's a little bit late for that. Any further damage they do is going to be terminal. And we are going to see a red team victory, so the blue team don't always win, I'll have you know. Scouts of Eglarest are in behind enemy lines as well, so a bit of charging. Sartor and Dorato are chasing down the catapult crew. The Doriath are just going to get overwhelmed now, and indeed a nice rear charge there from the scouts. So the Easterling general must have been in there somewhere, and he fell. So Thingol actually the last general to remain on the field. And the Easterlings are largely routing off now. In fact, I think the Easterlings are completely gone. So Doriath, the last player to remain alive, I think. Actually, no, Donna. Well, there goes Thingol anyway. Doesn't really matter at this point. I mean, it's more of a simultaneous loss as the Easterlings and Doriath scramble to leave. Could have gone either way this, though. I mean, again, not too much of the red team remains, but enough of it, and enough of good quality units as well. So Ents, some Balar units in there as well. So yeah, I think over here the Falathrim, Finarfin axis and how well they did initially with the situation that was in front of them was always a bit of a trend setter for this battle. Sons of Ulfang. So yeah, actually the Easterlings will be the last ones left alive. And the Scouts of Eglarest may be enough to rout them. A pincer charge there, and that's going to be it.
Today victory clearly belongs to our enemy, but vengeance will be ours.
If you say so. And there we have it. So yeah, based on that, I would say that it really was the Fingolfin army lurching forward when I don't think they had any real need to, which I think set the pace for this battle. I think the Easterlings and Doriath were able to execute on what they wanted to do on the other side quite well against Ossiriand and the Dwarves initially. They paid for doing it, but they were ultimately successful over there for the blue team. But Mithrim clearly didn't want to move forward, and Fingolfin would have been better off not moving forward either. And if they'd have just waited, the Easterlings and Doriath, the fight that the Easterlings and Doriath were having with the Dwarves and Ossiriand likely would have gone in a very similar vein, and then it would have forced Finarfin and the Falathrim to do something that maybe they wouldn't have wanted to do. Maybe send over more reinforcements, and then you could have moved forward, or maybe try and initiate a direct assault against you, but you would have been in a far more advantageous position to deal with that, especially with the Fingolfin army being what it was, largely based around Edain units in melee and at range. Far better off at holding a line in that regard, and then utilising the catapult to good effect. And obviously Mithrim with their archers in general are going to be good at that anyway. So one of those two eventualities probably would have been the way to go. But ultimately, it's rare that I would criticise someone for being aggressive, but on this occasion, I think that is the reasoning for why this battle took the shape that it did, and why the Falathrim and Finarfin were able to be as dominant as they were. Still, I think that the red team were worthy victors in the end, because they were the only player to really struggle a little bit more perhaps were the Dwarves, but that was more down to the situation being what it was. I mean, when things started to go south for them against the Eastlings and Doriath, they're far less able to retreat and be flexible in the way that Ossiriand are. Ossiriand can obviously slink away and hide. The dwarves can't really. They have to sort of stand stock still in position and try and outlast, and that was never really going to be the case here. So let's see what did the damage, at least for the Easterling army. Fangs the Faithless. Snow K return on archers, I suppose. Well, actually, no. You'd want archers to get over 100 kills, really. The Amberone Honor Guard, we didn't really see them in melee as such, but getting over 100 kills for a more defensive unit, especially considering that they were going up against the dwarves initially, and then by the time the late game fight was happening, the Eastlings were already on the back foot. That's not too bad. The Halberdiers, ever the great performers for the Easterlings, and Salamandrian Guard getting over 100 kills as well. So once again, Halberdiers, Salamandrian Guard always seem to do quite well. The Falksmen, not really enough longevity to pump those numbers up any higher, but then again, by the time they were committed, it was a part of a large flank force that was crippling the dwarves, and things went downhill for the Naugrim from there on pretty quickly indeed. So yeah, big thank you to Waffles for having the forethought to save this battle replay to the Discord for me to harvest later, and a big thanks to all the players as well for being a part of this battle replay. Nice to see Silmarillion continuing to provide replays in this time where I'm going to have to really lean on it a little bit more ahead of another work trip away, because a lot of these replays are a little bit easier for me to do even on weekdays where I have work. I'm going to have to start recording, I think, to maintain my schedule. There might be one slot missing, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Irregardless, bit of a lifesaver here in this rather busy summer for me in terms of keeping my schedule together, these kind of battle replays. We'll see how well they do in terms of views, but there's not much I can really do about that. It's this or nothing at this point. But yeah, as I've mentioned before, hopefully this period of kind of difficulty in maintaining my channel will be kind of the last I have to deal with this for a little while. As we move into the later part of the year, things are going to be changing up pretty significantly, I believe, for the reasons I've already mentioned in the channel update, which was a few weeks back at this point. And yeah, I'm starting to ramble again a little bit, so we'll move on pretty quickly. The next battle replay likely going to be another reforged one, and then by the time this is coming around, it will actually be coming towards the end of my next work trip away, so there's a lot to be going on. Also, the Knockout Tourney two-hander video will hopefully be coming out in the next couple of weeks or so as well. That's definitely the intention anyway. But yeah, big thanks to all the players once again. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.